On my 18th birthday, my two best friends and I got a hold of a bottle of tequila and took off in my dad's car to the old arcade by the shore of Lake Michigan. It had been closed down for a few years because, no joke, Jeffrey Dahmer had targeted one of his victims there. The police sealed off the place, and it was never reopened to the public. On the far side of the building, though, there was a skate floor, and one of my friends knew there was a way to break in through there. Our plan was to get drunk and skate around before heading to the arcade. We knew we couldn't play any of the games because the power was out, but we thought it would be cool to look around for old prizes and souvenirs. We parked the car down by the lake and entered in through the side door. Even though it said push written on it, my friend pulled open the door and it swung open easily, but only a few inches before a chain caught it. There was enough room for all three of us to slip inside. We each immediately took a shot and turned on our flashlights and began to walk across the wide open skate floor, our footsteps echoing loudly through the large room. There was empty beer cans and trash all over the floor, but we decided to strap on our skates and ride around in the dark anyway. We were the dumbest kids you've ever seen, but come on, we were having fun. We didn't make it around one lap before one of my friends tripped over something hard that was sticking out of the ground. We all stopped and shined our lights onto the ground and discovered the obstruction was actually a red candle. It had been melted down so far to its base that it sealed itself against the floor. Being the dumb kid that I was, I took an awkward swing at it with my skate and knocked off a chunk of wax. I was going to keep right on skating, completely oblivious to the possibility of tripping over anything else, when my friend scanned his flashlight around the ground and discovered a circle that had been painted on the floor. Inside the circle were many other circles intertwining, and there were at least 5 or 6 other candles scattered about. I laughed and said, "Some exorcism shit went down here, man." My friend skated into the center of the circle where something had clearly been burned, because the floor was scorched and black. I kept laughing, but my friends were more curious than amused, and kept examining the circle. Another friend raised their flashlight to the ceiling just above the circle, and looked up into the rafters above. She then said, "Do you guys see anything?" My other friend and I glanced up. We saw a few chains dangling from above, and something large and bulky was suspended just beyond them. I leapt up and swatted at one of the chains, which was incredibly stupid because I was wearing skates, and fell flat on my back when I came back down. My friend immediately started choking and screaming, not because of me, but because something wet had struck her head when I made contact with the chains. My other friend shined his flashlight at her, and we discovered something dark and red dripping down her face, in between her eyes, and down her nose. We all freaked and bailed, not even bothering to take our skates off. We awkwardly rolled back to the car, and my friend drove out of the property with her skates still on. She insisted that someone had followed us across the property, and that she heard heavy footsteps pursuing us. I don't recall hearing anything, but I was pretty buzzed at that point. I forgot to mention that before we drove here, I had a few beers, and being 18, I was pretty much a lightweight. Unbelievably, we made it home safely that night without crashing. In total, we were at the place less than 20 minutes. That building is gone now, demolished, so whatever was there is long gone now. But that begs the question, what exactly was being suspended from the roof? I'll never be able to answer that question, but I do have a very strong suspicion that the dark red liquid that struck my friend in the face was blood. I'm part of an all-female roller derby league. I would wake up at 6, skate around the local basketball court for about 40 minutes, hit the gym, then meet my team around 8. To be a champion at this sport, you have to be more than just fast. You have to be made of stone, and you have to be prepared to knock somebody down at a moment's notice. I've been with the Flying Banshees for about 3 years now. We were at a match against our most hated opponents. It was at this incredibly old and run-down roller rink. As we were tearing around the court, the lights would often flicker on and off like strobe lights. Add the occasional trickle of water from the leaky roof above, and it was by far the most dangerous course we had ever skated on. We really should have called off the match before it even started. but we hadn't driven 3 hours just to quit. Normally, before we start skating, there's a coordinator who checks us over to make sure that we're not carrying anything dangerous or illegal on our person. It's no joke. I recall one time someone had hid a razor blade in their elbow pads. Apparently that day, no one checked the other team, because halfway through the match, as I'm flying around the rink, trying to put some points on the board, I accidentally flew right into a girl on the opposing team, and she hit the ground hard. I didn't hear the whistle, so I kept right on going. You don't get into a sport like this without having to eat some floor sometimes. I've been flattened a few times now, but I always get right up and get right back into the game. As I was coming back around the track, I noticed she was standing back up and leaning against the barrier wall, staring at me with pure hatred. Right before I was just about to pass her, I saw her pull something from under her shirt. I raised both hands instinctively. The lights flickered, and when they came back on, I saw a pocket knife shoved through the palm of my hand. I slowed to a stop, just staring at it in disbelief. Then the pain hit me like a punch to the gut, and I went down. To make a long story short, I was rushed to the emergency room, and the girl was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. Turns out it wasn't her first offense. My hand was bandaged up, and I was the first one at our next practice. With the brace on my arm, my teammates took to calling me Claw, so at least I got a pretty cool nickname out of it. One thing that still bothers me though, and sometimes I can't help but dwell on it, but if the lights hadn't flickered when they did, would she have planted that knife somewhere far worse than my hand? Back in the late 90s, my parents used to run a local skating rink in the small town that I grew up in. There wasn't very much to do in town, so most of the time my friends and I would just hang out there at the rink. We weren't the rebellious type. We didn't go out back and smoke cigarettes or anything. We were just all about having fun. Since my parents both had day jobs, the rink would only be open between Thursdays and Sundays, which meant that Monday through Wednesday, I had the rink all to myself. They would often have me meet them there after school, and I would either do my homework at one of the tables or throw on a pair of skates and roll around while they took care of business stuff in the back. One rainy afternoon in February, when the rink was decorated all over with pink and red hearts for Valentine's Day, my mom and I stopped off there after she picked me up from school. I didn't have to do any homework that night, so I had the freedom to roll around the rink while my mom took care of some paperwork in the back office. As I was out on the skating floor doing laps while the Bee Gees were playing over the PA system, I noticed what looked like the silhouette of a person ducking behind the barricade. The lighting wasn't very good. Since the place was technically closed, only about half of the overhead lights were on. I was used to skating in the semi-darkness, but I would be lying to you if I said that it was completely safe. There were plenty of isolated spots where I couldn't see just beyond the barricade. Me being a dumb kid, I ignored the possibility of a creepy figure crouching in the darkness and just kept on skating. A few minutes later, I made for the side of the rink to step off the skate floor, when an arm shot out from behind the barricade and grabbed my face. A hand wrapped around my face and covered my eyes and mouth. Seconds later, I felt another arm wrap around my neck in a chokehold. My skates flew out from beneath me as I was being dragged sideways, my legs dragging behind me. I couldn't regain my balance because the wheels of the skates kept sliding around beneath me. Had the intruder continued to drag me, I probably wouldn't have been able to escape, but for whatever reason he lifted me off the ground, maybe to get a better grip on me, and my feet left the floor. I took advantage of that moment to kick the guy as hard as I could, and my skate connected with his shin. The guy cursed and stopped in his tracks, and I kicked him again. He released me, and by a miracle I landed directly on my skates and shot away like a bird, flying across the skate floor to the other side of the rink. I glanced behind me to see the figure exiting out of the back door, holding his leg. A minute or so later, I explained to my mom through a river of tears what had just happened. She immediately locked down the building and called the police. To make a long story short, the cops never found who the would-be kidnapper was. I couldn't give a very clear description of him, because it all took place in one of the darkest areas of the rink. Needless to say, this put a stop to my after-school skating sessions for a while. After the incident, we made it a point to check out the place more often and to make sure all the doors were locked and secured. About 5 years later, my parents ended up selling the roller rink. It was just too much for them to handle on top of already having full-time jobs. People have always asked me why I didn't bite or scream or fight back. Well, in that moment, I was honestly so shocked that for a few seconds I didn't even know how to react. I'm glad I had the clarity of mind to kick out when I did, or else who knows what would have became of me. Despite the terrible experience, I hated watching the place being torn down a few years after we sold it to make way for a new subdivision. Something that has always stuck with me over the years, something that I was too young to realize at the time, was that the kidnapper must have known that I sometimes skated in the rink alone. I sometimes wonder, how many times was I skating by myself, unaware that someone was watching me from the shadows?
There's always a reason to be afraid.